Welcome. Today we are setting out on a very focused philosophical journey centered on one single idea that really defines Western thought: freedom.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And we're going to trace how this concept evolved using the structured analysis laid out in the book. We'll go from the ancient world all the way through to modern existentialism.
Our mission really is to give you a clear shortcut, a way to grasp the biggest shifts in how we define liberty.
And it's essential because freedom isn't just one thing, is it?
No, not at all. It's a site of constant tension. Are we talking about freedom as, say, a metaphysical state, this transcendent ideal tied to some absolute truth?
Or is it something more grounded?
Or is it a teleological and immanent capability, the capacity to act virtuously right here on Earth? That fundamental split frames the entire discussion.
That tension is absolutely key. And by the way, for you listening, you are experiencing a unique two-voice AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
It's a great way to explore these ideas. And when we look at the classical world, I'm thinking Plato and Aristotle, the consensus is pretty clear.
Which is?
Freedom is not absolute. It's inherently limited by higher realities, things like truth and justice.
So it always has to be in harmony with something else.
Exactly. It must harmonize with individual virtue and the collective welfare. It's never just an unchecked right to do, well, anything you want.
Okay, let's unpack that classical foundation. We're starting in ancient Greece. When we put Plato and Aristotle side by side, what's the fundamental difference in how they see freedom's limits?
Well, Plato views freedom almost entirely through a metaphysical lens. It's achieved through rational inquiry.
Through thinking.
Through the soul's ascent toward the good. True freedom for Plato is intellectual liberation. If you remember his parable of the cave.
Of course.
Freedom is that painful act of turning away from the shadows, from our impulses, and toward the permanent light of truth and reason. You are free when your reason is in charge.
It doesn't even matter what's happening to you externally.
That's the idea. It's an incredibly internal kind of freedom. But then Aristotle, he provides a crucial counterpoint, doesn't he?
He does. He seems to pull the discussion down from that abstract metaphysical realm right into the practical political world.
Precisely. Aristotle's view of freedom is teleological, meaning it's purpose-driven, goal-oriented.
Okay.
So freedom is focused on its role in virtuous action within the pulses, within the community. For him, being free isn't just about knowing the truth. It's about acting rightly.
It's about self-mastery.
Yes, choosing the good action based on reason. This is where he makes that crucial distinction.
Between freedom and license.
Exactly. He distinguishes true freedom from what he called mere license, which is simply doing as one pleases.
Which, to many people today, sounds like the definition of freedom.
But for Aristotle, that's closer to slavery. You're a slave to your immediate desires. Civic liberty, the freedom you enjoy in public, is always bounded by justice. It has to serve the common good.
So if your action harms the community, it's just not freedom.
It's destructive license. End of story.
That is a huge shift. We go from internal rational control with Plato to external civic action with Aristotle. So let's fast forward into the medieval and early modern eras.
Right.
Here, the focus moves dramatically from the state, the polis, to the individual will and the role of moral law.
And this is where Augustine introduces the great theological and philosophical dilemma. He brings in the tension between human free will and divine omniscience.
If God knows every choice we'll make before we make it, how can we possibly be free?
That's the question.
Yeah.
Augustine argued that human beings must have free will. Otherwise, how could we be morally responsible for choosing good or evil? Freedom is the necessary place where moral choice happens.
But wait, if salvation depends on God's grace, as Augustine believed, doesn't that make our free will, well, sort of irrelevant in the end?
That is the profound tension. Augustine holds that our freedom is real, it's necessary for a moral life, but he makes a huge distinction.
Yeah.
Our efforts alone are not enough for salvation. Human freedom is responsible for sin, but grace is responsible for redemption. It shows that even when freedom is the ability to choose, its power is limited by a reality larger than itself.
So a few centuries later, how did Thomas Aquinas tackle this? How did he refine the definition?
Aquinas sought to harmonize things. He wanted to bring Aristotle's purpose-driven action together with Augustine's focus on the rational will.
A synthesis.
Yes, he defined freedom as the power to act or not to act, but, and this is key, this power must be grounded in reason and aligned with natural law.
So for Aquinas, genuine freedom means acting according to the rational structure of the universe.
Exactly. It isn't just the ability to choose between two options. It's the ability to choose the right option, the one that fulfills your rational nature.
And that leads us right into the Enlightenment. Immanuel Kant introduces the concept of autonomy, which you could argue is the most influential idea of freedom in the modern world.
I think you could. Kantian autonomy is transformative. It completely shifts the source of the law. For Kant, true freedom is realized when you can legislate moral law for yourself,
Self-governance.
in the deepest sense.
Yeah.
Your will is bound only by rules that you as a rational being determine for yourself.
But how does he square that with the deterministic natural world? I mean, doesn't science tell us we are just a series of causes and effects?
He solved that dilemma with a brilliant distinction between two realms. There's the phenomenal realm, the world of natural necessity where gravity works, things are determined.
The physical world.
And then there is the noumenal realm, the world of pure moral freedom and autonomy. So the phenomenal realm is the car, determined by physics. The noumenal is the driver, the self, making free choices.
That's a neat way to put it.
And that separation allowed him to keep human freedom without denying science. But crucially, this autonomy demands that your actions respect the dignity of all other rational agents. It's a universal golden rule.
We've now traced freedom through truth, justice, natural law, and universal reason. This feels like a good moment to pause and reflect.
It is. And before we dive into the radical modern challenge to all of this, it's worth remembering that Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel, offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques designed to do just that, inspire reflection and rational thought.
That's right. So far, we've defined freedom almost entirely through its constraints. But what happened when Friedrich Nietzsche came along and just threw out all those historical constraints?
Nietzsche's existential freedom is a complete rejection of, well, both classical and Christian metaphysics. For him, the old constraints, natural law, divine will, they were just fictions imposed on us.
So freedom is no longer found by following an external law.
No. It becomes this raw existential project, self-overcoming. It's the power to creatively affirm one's own values, to redefine meaning in a meaningless universe. It is the ultimate expression of the I will.
That's a fundamental break from everything we've talked about. If freedom is now absolute self-creation, how did later thinkers, someone like Hannah Arendt, try to manage these wildly different ideas?
Arendt brought some much-needed clarity. She did it by separating the two dominant modern definitions. She distinguished between what she called philosophical freedom.
Which is Nietzsche's internal I will.
Exactly, the internal faculty of will. And she contrasted that with political freedom.
And what did she mean by political freedom?
For Arendt, political freedom is the collective capacity for action. It's the I can. It's the freedom to begin something new in the public sphere, a freedom shared among equals that results in cooperative action.
That's fascinating.
And what's deeply relevant for us today is Arndt's warning. She argued that an excessive focus on internal sovereignty on Nietzsche's I will can actually breed domination.
So true freedom is found in cooperation, not isolation.
In public cooperation and plurality, yes.
That brings us full circle, right back to the very first constraint we mentioned, justice. The entire journey seems to suggest that freedom, when it's untethered from ethics, becomes self-destructive.
Absolutely. The philosopher Mortimer Adler asserted that liberty is a limited good, and it's constrained by justice, which he saw as the ultimate societal value.
Meaning, any freedom that permits harm to others fails the test.
It fails the moral test. And this brings us to the critical test for validating any claim to liberty.
Which you call rational reciprocity.
Yes, it's the final boundary. If you claim a freedom, you have to ask, would this claim still be valid if the roles were reversed?
If my freedom requires someone else's servitude or harm,
then it fails the test of justice. And philosophically, it's not genuine freedom, it's merely license. The whole history of freedom is the story of trying to ground it in something bigger than just desire.
So for the learner, what does this all mean for us today? This journey shows that philosophical freedom isn't simple. It's a dynamic union of rational self-determination and ethical limits.
That's a great way to put it. The Platonic idea of transcendence and the Aristotelian idea of fulfillment, they both persist. They shape all of our modern political and personal discussions.
And the synthesis seems clear.
I think so. The most robust, enduring definition of freedom is one grounded in reason, in reciprocal justice, and in a deep respect for the dignity of others. For you, the learner, the key takeaway is that philosophical freedom is always a work in harmony. It's never an isolated absolute.
And a final provocative thought for you to mull over. If justice is the ultimate constraint on liberty, where in modern society do we see the tension between individual choice and egalitarian fairness being tested most severely today? Something to explore on your own. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary, subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally. See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.